So as we're making our way through the book of Acts, we have seen different degrees of persecution and attacks against the body of the church. These people would later on be known as the Christians. First, we had different episodes involving those of the priesthood and then the high priest, and the assemblies that they commissioned to persecute them. We had Saul holding the coats of the men that stoned Stephen. Then we saw him have a change of heart and become a Christian himself. But I digress. But now we are moving to another level, and we're seeing the leadership, the rulers of the lands. We're going to have an episode involving King Herod. So there were several King Herods. It was a dynasty. And like many dynasties, they start off really good, and then the next generation does a little worse than the first, and it just degrades over time. So after Herod the Great, we had Herod Antipas. We have seen mention of Herod Antipas several times in the Gospels. First, we have the matter involving John the Baptist and the death of John the Baptist. This was the man that commissioned his death. Another time that we see him is in the matter of Jesus when he was arrested. Pontius Pilate wanted to bring Jesus to Herod to have Herod's court look after the matter, but Herod rejected him. And so we saw Jesus tried in Pilate's court instead. The reign of Herod Antipas was from 4 BC to the year of our Lord 39. So he didn't reign for very much longer after the crucifixion of Jesus. So after the reign of Herod Antipas, we have Herod Agrippa. Herod Agrippa was the nephew of Herod Antipas. His reign was from the year of our Lord 41 to 44. And that's who we're going to be mostly dealing with from now on. Anyway, let's get back to the scriptures. Acts 12:1. About that time, Herod the king stretched forth his hands to afflict and oppress and torment some who belonged to the church assembly. 12:2. And he killed James, the brother of John, with a sword. 12:3. And when he saw that it was pleasing to the Jews, he proclaimed further, and arrested Peter also. This was during the days of unleavened bread, the Passover week. Herod Agrippa was a weak leader. As we can see, he didn't reign for very long. And he was a people pleaser. He just tried to do whatever he could to keep the people happy. So he compromised on many things as a result. And his reign was very short as a result. So we see that he killed James, the brother of John. James, the son of Zebedee, one of the sons of thunder. But also one of the 12, one of the apostles. Now, perhaps the idea here was that by taking out the leadership, it would quash whatever it is that they are doing, a way to stop the spread of the gospel. Of course, this did not work, but the idea that it might made certain groupings and certain factions of the Jewish people very happy. And when he saw how happy these people were, he wanted to continue on doing that as a method of ensuring that his power was not questioned. There's also the secondary aspect where there was the belief that the Christians would eventually lead to a rebellion, and if there was a rebellion, then the Romans would come in and they would just kind of wipe everybody out, because it was a bit of a vassal state at the time. So this was something for more than one reason. So we see that he has arrested Peter. So Peter is now in prison, in the dungeons of Herod Antipas. The book of Acts 12:4. And when he seized Peter, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 squads of soldiers, of 4 each, to guard him, proposing after the Passover to bring him forth to the people. So Peter has been arrested, he's been thrown in prison, and he has 16 dedicated guards. And they're watching him like a hawk, making sure that he does not escape. This is probably overkill, but we're going to see later on that there was probably no amount of guards that could keep him contained. For the power of God is significantly greater than that of man. And at any moment and at any time, the Lord can release him from his bindings and those that are guarding him. We call that foreshadowing. Now we see mention too of the times and the seasons, with it being near the Passover. So perhaps they would have already done something if the times were different. They didn't want a repeat of what occurred another year, some years before this. I, of course, am making reference to the death and crucifixion of Jesus, who was the Christ, just so things are crystal clear and not obfuscated. So let's see what happens. The Acts of the Apostles. 12:5. So Peter was kept in prison, but fervently prayer for him was persistently made to God by the church assembly. 12:6. The very night before Herod was about to bring him forth, Peter was sleeping between 2 guards, fastened with 2 chains, and sentries before the door were guarding the prison. So we see the description here. He was locked right down. He was chained up. The doors were guarded. Everything was secured. There's no way he's getting out of here. Or so they thought. So while all this is happening, we see that the church is praying for him without ceasing. They're going to the Lord to ask for his deliverance. The Acts of the Apostles. 12:7. And suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared standing beside him, and a light shone in the place where he was, and the angel gently smote Peter on the side and awakened him, saying, "Get up quickly." And the chains fell off his hands. So an angel appears before him. Now, angels are beings that are very different than us humans. They perceive the universe, space, time in a very different way. They are not bound by the same rules that we are. And as such, the angel can simply walk in and walk out of a locked room with no entrance, with no restriction or difficulty. And the angel appears there, pokes Peter on the side, wakes him up. Peter is probably a little bit groggy. He's falling asleep. He's going, he's not speaking words coherently. The angel says, "Get up." And Peter, of course, he's chained to the guards. He's probably tied to the table. He's bound up completely. There's probably no way he could get up. But the angel is able to disable the locks, to disable the bindings, and they simply fall off. So Peter is able to stand up, probably waking up a little bit more now, looking to see what's going on, seeing this angel there, remembering that he's in prison, but now he's free, and he doesn't know if this is a vision or what's going on exactly, but we're going to see a little bit more here. The Acts of the Apostles. 12:8. And the angel said to him, "Tighten your belt and bind your sandals." And he did so. And he said to him, "Wrap your outer garment around you and follow me." So Peter, he probably had his clothes loosened to sleep. He didn't have his belt all the way tight, so his pants were a little bit loosened. And his sandals, they would have been loose as well. Maybe he just kind of slipped them off. A little bit more comfortable to sleep in. I mean, he's chained to these guards. It's probably pretty difficult to sleep. So anything that could be done for a little bit of comfort, of course he would do. But now that it's time to move, he's got to tighten his belt, pull up his pants, tighten those shoes. It's time to go. They're going for a bit of a journey. He's got to put his jacket on. It's a little bit chilly out. It gets cold at night in that area. The Acts of the Apostles.
12:9. And Peter went out along, following him. And he was not conscious that what was apparently being done by the angel was real, but thought he was seeing a vision. 12:10. When they had passed through the first guard and the second, they came to the iron gate, which leads into the city. Of its own accord, the gate swung open, and they went out and passed on through one street, and at once the angel left him. 12:11. Then Peter came to himself and said, Now I really know and am sure that the Lord has sent his angel and delivered me from the hands of Herod and from all that the Jewish people were expecting to do to me.
So Peter's probably still a little bit groggy, but he's got his pants done up. He's got his sandals on. He's ready to go for a little bit of a walk. And the angel of the Lord is leading the way. And he looks to his sides and he sees these guards. They're all passed out. They're in a deep sleep. The big barred doors and the locks and everything, they're all opening up and being highly convenient. Now, a prison, they don't typically have a door that just goes straight to the outside. They're usually a bit more of a labyrinth where you got to go through multiple doors and checkpoints in order to get to the outside. That's one of the ways that they ensure maximum security. And we have those guardsmen, the 16 there, they're not doing so great. And all these locks and barriers are being conveniently opened. And he's just following this angel. They're just on this journey proceeding towards the outdoors. So Peter and the angel are out of prison now, and they're heading towards the gate to leave the city. In those days, cities were surrounded by walls. They were surrounded with walls until the gunpowder era, which basically made walls obsolete. Now, the walls acted as a way of protecting the people from banditry and mischievous individuals, but they also acted as a way of keeping the people inside so they couldn't just take all their wealth or goods or steal from somebody and just take off running with it. And there was a certain amount of traffic in and out of the city, so they had to have big gates. And these gates would be big enough that it would probably require quite a bit of time to open and close. And they would probably have different locking systems. Maybe it's like the board goes across or something else. But it would take time to open and close these doors, and it would take multiple people. So when Peter and the angel get towards this gate, it's basically an automatic garage door. It just opens on its own, and they're able to just pass right through it without being inhibited. Now, there'd be guards by the gate, and they're probably all sleeping now. There was probably some type of sleep miracle cast upon them, or they dozed off. Whatever the circumstances may have been, God led them out of the city. So it's at this point in time that they're out of the city that Peter realizes just what has transpired, that he has gotten out of prison. This angel has led him out of prison, out of the city, and out of the hand of Herod and the Jewish people, who were probably going to have a show trial and then sentence him to death. So he escaped death by getting out of prison here in this instance. The book of Acts.
12:12. When he, at a glance, became aware of this, comprehending all the elements of the case, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose surname was Mark, where a large number were assembled together and were praying. 12:13. And when he knocked at the gate of the porch, a maid named Rhoda came to answer.
So Peter's out and about. He realizes that this was not a vision, this wasn't a dream, this was the reality. He is now free from the prison. The angel that was guiding him, he's kind of disappeared. We don't know where he is now. The story's not really about him anyway. So what is Peter to do with his newfound freedom? He goes to see his friends. And so he goes to Mary's house, Mary, the mother of John Mark. This was probably a place that they gathered regularly and had different meetings there. Maybe it was a house of a size that made that a good place to go. We don't really have the details on the building, and it doesn't really matter either. It's hard to say what time this would be exactly. From the way that he was sleeping earlier, I would have thought it would be nighttime when he escaped the prison through cover of darkness, especially with the gate and everything being closed. But how far this house is away and how long it took to walk there and what time it is now, whether it's still night or early morning, who knows? But he gets there and he knocks on the door, he calls out looking for someone to answer the door, and there's this woman there, Rhoda, and she comes to the door to answer it and she hears his voice. The Acts of the Apostles
12:14. And recognizing Peter's voice in her joy, she failed to open the gate, but ran in and told the people that Peter was standing before the porch gate.
So Rhoda recognizes this voice. It is the man to whom they've been praying about. They've been in prayer since the moment of his arrest. And now here he is. He's there. She knows that voice. But rather than answering the door and bringing him into the house, she retreats further inside the enclosure to where they are in prayer and informs them that Peter is here. I imagine that she was probably fairly young, and she probably never heard the end of this for the rest of her days. And we're still talking about it today, and it is a very cute story. But it doesn't end here. The Acts of the Apostles
12:15. They said to her, "You are crazy." But she persistently and strongly and confidently affirmed that it was truth. They said, "It is his angel."
So they didn't believe her. And I mean, it makes sense. Why didn't she just open the door and say something to him or something like that? So we see this stuff about an angel. Now, there was a Jewish belief at the time that everybody had guardian angels, and that a guardian angel would look like the person that they are guarding. So they supposed it was his guardian angel. The Acts of the Apostles
12:16. But meanwhile, Peter continued knocking, and when they had opened the gate and saw him, they were amazed.
Meanwhile, Peter's there outside in the cold, banging on the door, calling out, waiting for an answer, not getting an answer, wondering what's going on, what are they doing, why haven't they come to the door? And then they open the door and they see him and they are amazed. And that makes sense. I mean, he just escaped maximum security prison. They were praying about him, and here he is. How cool is that? They see their prayer answered by Peter's appearance before them. The Acts of the Apostles
12:17. But motioning to them with his hand to keep quiet and listen, he relayed to them how the Lord had delivered him out of the prison. And he said, "Report all this to James the Less and to the brethren." Then he left and went to some other place. 12:18. Now as soon as it was day, there was no small disturbance among the soldiers over what had become of Peter.
So Peter told them the whole story of the events that transpired and how the Lord got him out of prison. And the next day, or when the sun was finally rising, there was a big disturbance because you have these guards in the prison, and the person that they are guarding has disappeared, and he has got past all of them. So they're looking for him. They don't know where he is, they don't know where he's gone, and they don't know how he got out. Now, in that era and in that time, there was often very strong punishments for letting a prisoner go loose. So these guards are going to be in a very desperate situation to try to locate him and to bring him back. And they don't have much time because he is supposed to have an audience with Herod that day. The Acts of the Apostles.
12:19. And when Herod had looked for him and could not find him, he placed the guards on trial and commanded that they should be led away to execution. Then Herod went down from Judea to Caesarea and stayed on there.
So they looked and looked, and they could not find Peter. And we see the fate of those guards, that they would be led away for execution for the crime of letting Peter go free. I don't know what the case was or the situation, but I hope that these guards had some conversations with Peter while he was imprisoned.
The Book of Acts. 12:20. Now Herod cherished a bitter animosity and hostility for the people of Tyre and Sidon, and their deputies came to him in a united body, and having made Blastus, the king's chamberlain, their friend, they asked for peace, because their country was nourished by and depended on the king's country for food.
So now we're getting into a little bit of a political section. So King Herod, he's been kind of quarreling with the people of Tyre and Sidon. Tyre and Sidon are both city-states. They're located in what would now be called Lebanon. And they're looking to kind of put this conflict behind them and to work together. So perhaps there's some sort of conflict between Herod and the Romans. And the people of Tyre and Sidon, they rely on King Agrippa and his kingdom for food and trade, and they're kind of picking sides that way. And we have Blastus, the king's chamberlain. So this is somebody that Herod has appointed or is in employment through Herod, and he is acting as a bit of a mediator to kind of work out this deal. This is just all background information of what's going on in this event. There's other accounts outside of the Bible. In Josephus' book, The Antiquity of the Jews, he talks about this particular event here, or the follow-up to this. So this is just kind of background as to the conflict that is going on politically at that time. Let's keep going. The Acts of the Apostles.
12:21. On an appointed day, Herod arrayed himself in his royal robes, took his seat upon his throne, and addressed an oration to them. 12:22. And the assembled people shouted, "It is the voice of a God, and not of a man."
So this is a very interesting passage, and we can read it and interpret it in itself and see what is going on here. You know, he's all dressed up. It's a day of celebration. The people see how he's dressed and how he's talking, and they claim that he is a god. When we look at external sources, we see that this was a day of celebration. There were games being held, and this was the second morning, so the second day of the games to celebrate Caesar. And he was dressed in garments of silver, and when the morning sun fell on him, because it was silver, it was glowing. And this was apparel that kind of looked like the way that the Phoenician sun god was depicted as looking. So people saw the way that he was dressed and the way the sun was reflecting, and they believed that this was that particular god. Of course, he's going to have a decision on what he wants to do with this. He can either deny being a god or he can embrace it. And we're going to see him make a poor decision now. Acts of the Apostles
12:23. And at once an angel of the Lord smote him and cut him down, because he did not give God the glory, the preeminence and kingly majesty that belonged to him as the supreme ruler, and he was eaten by worms and died.
So by him not denying that he was God, he was basically claiming that he was. Maybe there were some more circumstances here that weren't written down, but it was bad enough that an angel of the Lord struck him down. According to the account that Josephus has, he collapsed from intense pain in his stomach or abdomen and died 5 days later in excruciating pain. His reign was very short. He was only the ruler for 3 years. So I guess next time we'll be looking at another ruler, the Acts of the Apostles
12:24. But the word of the Lord concerning the attainment through Christ of salvation in the kingdom of God continued to grow and spread. 12:25. And Barnabas and Saul came back from Jerusalem when they had completed their mission, bringing with them John, whose surname was Mark.
So the journey continues. After these events transpire, we have a regrouping, and they're going to go on the next mission trip, or at least they'll plan the next one. And that's the end of the chapter. Subscribe to see the next episode.